"You are the man I choose for my future," the Apache woman said to the struggling farmer. Elias woke up before dawn, as he did every morning. The faint light of the early morning barely touched the fields, but he was already moving, carrying a worn bucket to the well. His hands, rough and calloused from years of labor, gripped the wooden handle tightly as he drew water for his crops and animals. The chill of the morning air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. His mind was already running through the tasks of the day, feeding the chickens, checking the fence, repairing the irrigation channels, and then tending the small patch of vegetables that stubbornly refused to grow as he hoped. Every day was the same, and every day felt like a test of endurance, patience, and hope. Elias's farm was small, nothing like the vast land some of his neighbors worked. He inherited this plot from his father, who had passed away when Elias was just a teenager. His mother had died when he was even younger, leaving him alone to care for the land. He remembered the stories his father used to tell him, tales of abundant harvests, of golden fields waving in the wind, of the joy that came from seeing hard work turn into life-giving crops. Elias often wondered if those stories were real or just dreams told to comfort a boy who had little to eat. Now, standing in the early light, he wished he could make those stories come alive on his own land. The soil was tough, rocky in places and thin in others. No matter how much he tilled and watered, it seemed to resist him. Some mornings he would walk through the rows of tiny sprouts, talking to them softly, as if his words could encourage them to grow. "Come on, little ones," he would say. "You can do it. We'll make it together." Sometimes it felt as if they were listening, but more often than not, they simply struggled silently, leaves curled and pale under the harsh sun. Farmers in the village whispered about him behind his back. They said Elias was unlucky, that he was too stubborn, that the land simply did not want him to succeed. He heard their words sometimes, and they stung, but he did not let them stop him. Life was hard, and it was lonely. Elias had very few friends. He had grown accustomed to solitude, finding company in the birds that landed in his garden, the wind that rustled through the trees, and the quiet murmurs of the river that ran a few miles away. Yet beneath the routine, beneath the early mornings and long afternoons, there was a part of him that still dreamed. He dreamed of a life where the farm would thrive, where he could see the fruits of his labor filling baskets for the market, where neighbors would nod in respect rather than pity. Most of all, he dreamed of companionship, someone who could walk beside him in the early mornings and share the weight of the work, someone who could see past the struggle to the man he was inside. Elias often sat on a large rock near the edge of his property before dawn, gazing at the horizon. The sky would slowly lighten, painting itself in shades of purple, pink, and gold. These moments were his escape. For a little while he could imagine a world beyond the hard-packed dirt and stubborn weeds. He imagined the laughter of children running through the fields, the smell of fresh bread coming from a small kitchen, the warmth of someone holding his hand after a long day. These were dreams that seemed almost too far away, yet he clung to them because they reminded him that life was bigger than hardship. Despite the struggles, Elias had a sense of determination that few could match. He rose each day with the same quiet discipline, moving through the tasks with a steady rhythm. He repaired fences with precision, made sure the animals had enough water and food, and tended the smallest plants as if they were his most precious treasures. He experimented with different planting techniques, tried new ways to protect the crops from pests, and read every book about farming he could get his hands on. He did not know if all of it would work, but he refused to stop trying. Some nights, exhausted and covered in dirt, he would sit by the fire and allow himself a small smile. "At least I am trying," he would whisper to himself. "At least I am not giving up." The villagers were a constant reminder of how fragile his situation was. When he went to the market to sell eggs or vegetables, people would glance at him with polite smiles that did not hide the doubt in their eyes. Some would offer advice he had heard 100 times, as if a simple word could magically change his luck. Others would quietly avoid him, convinced that misfortune clung to him like a shadow. Elias felt the sting of their skepticism, but he refused to let it define him. In his heart, he believed that persistence could outlast misfortune. He believed that hard work, even when it seemed futile, could eventually yield a reward. Every season brought its own challenges. Spring meant planting in uncertain soil, hoping for rain at the right time. Summer brought scorching heat that threatened to dry the crops and make the earth hard as stone. Autumn was a tense waiting period, watching the plants inch toward maturity, never knowing if the yield would be enough to carry him through the winter. And winter, cold and unforgiving, forced him to focus on the animals and repair the damage done by storms, winds, and snow. Through it all, Elias maintained a quiet hope, a small flame that refused to be extinguished by hardship. One morning, after a particularly long night of rain that flooded part of his field, Elias surveyed the damage. The water had washed away some of the seedlings he had planted weeks ago. His heart sank, but he did not despair. He spent the next hours carefully replanting what he could, patting the soil down gently as if soothing a frightened child. He spoke softly, encouraging each tiny sprout. "We will grow," he said. "We will get through this together." Even though the work was exhausting, he felt a small sense of pride. It was not just about survival. It was about proving to himself that he could face whatever came his way without surrendering. By midday, the sun had broken through the clouds, casting warm light on the damp earth. Elias wiped the sweat from his forehead and took a moment to breathe. He looked at the horizon again, beyond the farm, beyond the village, imagining the life he hoped to create. Sometimes in those quiet moments he allowed himself to dream of love, of someone who could understand the weight he carried, someone who could share both the struggles and the small joys of life on the farm. He did not know if such a person existed, but the thought of them gave him strength. As evening approached, Elias tended the animals one last time. He gathered eggs, fed the chickens, and checked on the goats. The work was exhausting, yet it brought him a strange sense of satisfaction. The animals depended on him, and in caring for them, he felt a connection to life itself. Afterward, he walked slowly through the fields, hands brushing over the young plants, feeling the rough leaves and soft sprouts beneath his fingers. This simple contact with life, even when it struggled, reminded him that he had purpose. He was not simply a man beaten down by misfortune. He was a man who persisted, a man who cared, a man who still dreamed. As night fell, Elias sat by the small fire in his modest home, the day's labor behind him. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers from the river nearby. He allowed himself a small smile, thinking about the possibilities tomorrow might bring. Each day was a challenge, yes, but it was also a chance to grow, a chance to persevere, a chance to find the life he imagined. And somewhere in the quiet of the night, in the gentle flicker of the firelight, Elias allowed himself to hope once more, quietly believing that one day his life could change for the better. Elias had been working in the fields longer than usual that day. The sun was high, beating down on his back, and sweat ran freely across his forehead. His hands were blistered from pulling weeds and repairing the fence, but he did not stop. There was always something to do, always some small task that demanded attention. He paused briefly to wipe his face with the sleeve of his worn shirt and looked up toward the distant hills, hoping for even a small breeze to ease the heat. It was in that moment, when the world seemed particularly quiet except for the wind and the occasional chirp of birds, that he noticed someone standing near the river that ran along the edge of his property. At first, Elias thought it was another farmer, or perhaps a traveler passing through the village. But as he looked closer, he saw that it was a young woman. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Her long, dark hair fell over her shoulders in a smooth cascade, catching the sunlight and glinting with a hint of brown. Her eyes were sharp and observant, yet gentle, taking in everything around her with quiet curiosity. She wore simple clothing, but there was an elegance to her movements, a grace that made her seem connected to the land in a way Elias could not immediately explain. Elias approached cautiously, unsure if she had noticed him. When their eyes finally met, she smiled, a small, confident smile that seemed to carry warmth and understanding. "Hello," she said, her voice soft but clear.
I didn't mean to startle you.
"I was just walking along the river and saw you working." Elias nodded, slightly embarrassed. "No, it's fine," he replied. "I'm Elias. This is my farm, or at least, I try to make it one." His voice carried a trace of humor, but it was clear that it was also an attempt to hide the weariness that clung to him after years of struggle. "I'm Aylin," she said. "I live not too far from here, with my family. I come here sometimes to walk by the river, to think, to enjoy the quiet." There was a calm confidence in her tone, a sense that she was completely comfortable in her own skin. Elias felt a strange mix of curiosity and admiration. There was something about her that felt alive, as if she had a light within her that the world had not yet dimmed. For a few moments, they stood in silence. The river flowed gently beside them, the water sparkling in the sunlight. Birds called to one another from the trees, and the wind rustled the leaves in a soothing rhythm. Elias felt a strange sense of peace in Aylin's presence, as if the weight of his worries had momentarily lifted. He found himself talking, almost without realizing it, about the farm, the challenges he faced, the long hours he spent trying to coax life from stubborn soil. Aylin listened attentively, nodding as he spoke. She did not interrupt, nor did she offer the usual words of pity he had grown accustomed to hearing from others in the village. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions. "What do you enjoy most about the work?" she asked. "Even with all the challenges, what keeps you going?" Elias paused, considering her question. Most people, he thought, would not have asked such a thing. They would have dismissed him, told him to give up, or laughed at his efforts. But Aylin, she was different. "I suppose," he said slowly, "it's the hope that someday all this hard work will mean something. That I can see the land thrive, see the crops grow, see life here flourish. Even when it seems impossible, I can't stop trying." Aylin smiled again, a gentle expression that made Elias feel as if she truly understood. "I think that's a very brave thing," she said. "To keep working, to keep believing, even when it's hard. Not everyone has that strength."
Her words made him feel a warmth he had not felt in a long time, a recognition of his efforts, a validation that someone saw him not as unlucky or small, but as determined and capable. They talked for hours, though neither noticed how much time had passed.
Aylin shared stories of her family, her Apache heritage, and the lessons she had learned from her elders about respecting the land and living in harmony with nature. Elias listened with fascination, feeling a connection to her words that went beyond mere interest. There was wisdom in her stories and a sense of purpose that Elias found inspiring. In turn, he shared his own experiences, the hardships of farming, and the dreams he held quietly in his heart. As the sun began to descend toward the horizon, casting a golden glow over the fields and river, Elias realized he had not felt this alive, this scene, in years. There was something about Aylin's presence that made the world feel wider, more vibrant, and full of possibilities he had long thought impossible. He noticed the way the light caught her hair, the softness of her laughter, and the calm, steady confidence in her eyes. For the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of hope, not just for the farm, but for life itself. Aylin noticed the fatigue in his posture, the strain in his shoulders from long hours of labor.
You work very hard, she said gently.
"Do you take time for yourself?" Elias shook his head, smiling faintly. "Not really. There's always something to do. But I guess I enjoy the work. It keeps me moving, keeps me focused, and sometimes it gives me moments like this, when the world feels quiet and alive, and I can breathe for a while." Aylin nodded, understanding. "It's good to have those moments," she said, "to feel alive even in the middle of hard work, to find beauty where others might see only struggle." As the light faded and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, they reluctantly parted ways, but not without a sense that this meeting was not the last. Elias watched her walk along the riverbank, the movements graceful and steady, her figure slowly blending with the evening light. For the first time in years, he felt anticipation, an eagerness to see her again, to talk, to share, to learn from someone who seemed to understand both the struggle and the hope that lived within him. The next days passed with the rhythm of routine work, but Elias found his thoughts drifting more often to Aylin. He remembered her smile, her calm confidence, the way she had listened without judgment, the wisdom in her words. For the first time, he imagined the possibility of companionship, of someone walking beside him, not to pity him, but to share the journey. This thought, new and strange, brought a quiet joy he had not known in years. A week later, Elias returned to the same spot by the river. His heart raced as he wondered if Island would be there. To his relief and delight, she was. She waved and he waved back, feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. They began to walk together along the riverbank, talking and laughing as if they had known each other for years. Their conversations were light at times, deep at others, touching on dreams, hopes, and the small wonders of life. Each step they took together felt natural, as if the earth itself had arranged their paths to meet. In the following weeks, their meetings became more frequent. They shared meals under the shade of trees, listened to the wind in the reeds, and spoke of their dreams. Elias told her about the farm, about the challenges of planting and harvesting, about the nights he spent worrying over the crops. Island spoke of her culture, of the lessons her parents taught her about courage, respect, and resilience. Through these conversations, a bond began to form, a quiet, steadfast connection built on trust, understanding, and shared moments of simplicity and beauty. The villagers began to notice the time Elias spent at the river, but he did not care. For the first time, he had someone in his life who inspired him, who gave him strength and hope without asking for anything in return. Aylin did not pity him. She respected him. She saw the effort he put into his work, the persistence that defined his life, and she admired it. And Elias, in turn, admired her spirit, her intelligence, her grace, and the way she could bring light to even the hardest of days. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Aylin turned to Elias and said softly, "You work so hard, yet you carry yourself with such patience. I can see how much you care, not just for your farm, but for life itself. That is a rare quality." Elias looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her words. I just try to do my best," he said. "Sometimes it feels like it's not enough, but I keep trying." Aylin smiled, her eyes meeting his with warmth. "It is enough, more than enough. And one day, I believe, it will bring you everything you hope for, perhaps even more." Elias felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of hope and gratitude. For the first time, he felt that he was not alone. Someone had seen him, truly seen him, and believed in him. That simple recognition, that quiet acceptance, gave him a new strength, a belief that no matter how difficult life became, there was still beauty to be found, and perhaps even love. As night fell and stars began to sparkle in the sky, they walked together to the edge of the river. The water reflected the shimmering lights above, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of nature settling into sleep. In that moment, Elias realized that his life, though still full of struggle, was beginning to change. A new chapter was opening, one that he had not dared to imagine until now. A chapter filled with hope, connection, and the possibility of something extraordinary. After that first meeting by the river, Elias found his days both busier and brighter. The farm still demanded endless attention, and the work remained hard, but there was a new energy within him. Thoughts of Island floated through his mind like a gentle breeze, lifting his spirits even when the sun was harsh and the soil stubborn. He began to anticipate their meetings with a quiet excitement, looking forward to the moments when the world would slow and he could simply walk and talk with her. Island, too, seemed to feel the same. She would come to the river with a small basket of food, sometimes homemade bread, sometimes fruit from her family's land. Together they would sit beneath the shade of an old oak tree, sharing simple meals and speaking of everything and nothing at the same time. Aylin had a way of listening that made Elias feel understood in a way he had never experienced before. She never interrupted or offered easy solutions. Instead, she asked questions that made him think, made him see his own life in new ways. Over time, they began to share not just words, but experiences. One afternoon, Aylin brought a small sketchbook with her. She drew the river, the trees, and even some of Elias's farm animals with a remarkable skill. Elias watched in awe as she captured the beauty of his simple world with her hands. "You see things differently," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "I try to notice the small details," Aylin replied. Sometimes it's the small things that matter the most, like the curve of a river, the bend of a branch, the way the sunlight touches the soil. Life is full of little wonders if we take the time to see them. Elias thought about her words for a long time. He realized that he had been so focused on survival, on getting through each day, that he had often overlooked the beauty around him. Aylin's perspective made him pause and notice the gentle sway of the corn, the laughter of birds, the rich scent of earth after a morning rain. Slowly he began to see his farm not just as a place of work and struggle, but as a world filled with life and small joys. Their friendship grew steadily. Aylin often encouraged Elias to take breaks, to enjoy moments of leisure and reflection. Sometimes they would skip stones on the river, racing each other to see whose stone would go the farthest. Other times they would lie on the grass, staring at clouds and imagining shapes and stories in them. These moments, simple as they were, became a balm to Elias's weary spirit. He found himself laughing more, feeling lighter, and embracing the world with a new sense of hope. As their bond deepened, Elias began to share his fears as well. He told Aylin about the nights when he felt despair creep in, when the crops failed and the weight of the farm felt unbearable. He spoke of the ridicule from neighbors, the loneliness of life spent mostly alone, and the uncertainty that seemed to shadow every plan he made. Aylin listened, her eyes soft with empathy. "You carry so much on your shoulders," she said gently, "but you do it with courage. That is rare, Elias. Many would have given up long ago, but you keep going, and that shows a strength of heart most people never discover in themselves." Her words touched him deeply. It was one thing for him to push himself through struggle, but it was another to have someone else notice, to recognize not only the hardship, but also the resilience behind it. He began to see Aylin not just as a companion, but as someone who understood and respected the man he was, flaws and all. The seasons continued to change, and with them came new challenges. A sudden summer storm once swept through the valley, uprooting small plants and flooding parts of his fields. Elias felt a familiar wave of frustration and despair, worrying that months of hard work had been lost. But Aylin was there, steady and calm, helping him assess the damage and encouraging him to take each task one step at a time. "Some things are out of our control," she said, her hand brushing against his as she pointed to the riverbank. "But how we respond, that is where we have power. You have worked hard, and that effort cannot be washed away." Her words had a profound effect on Elias. Together, they worked late into the evening, repairing what could be saved, planting anew where possible, and caring for the injured animals that had been frightened by the storm. The shared labor created a bond stronger than either had expected. Elias realized that Aylin's presence was not just comforting. She made him stronger, more capable, and more determined to face whatever life might throw at him. Their friendship began to hint at something more, though neither spoke of it directly. Elias found himself thinking about Aylin at odd moments, while tending the animals, repairing fences, or planting seeds. Her laughter echoed in his mind long after she had left, and the memory of her smile lingered like sunlight on a cold morning. Aylin, too, seemed affected, often gazing at him with a gentle intensity, a warmth in her eyes that spoke volumes without words. One day, Aylin suggested that Elias accompany her to the nearby woods to collect herbs and berries. He hesitated at first, worried about leaving the farm unattended, but she insisted. "It will do you good," she said, her voice playful yet insistent. "You need to see the world beyond the fields sometimes." Reluctantly he agreed, and they set off together, walking along a narrow path lined with wildflowers. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Elias felt a freedom he had not experienced in years. As they collected herbs and berries, Aylin taught him their uses, telling stories of how her ancestors had relied on plants for medicine, food, and rituals. Elias listened intently, fascinated by her knowledge and the way she connected history, culture, and nature into lessons that felt both practical and magical. During a quiet moment, Aylin picked a small flower and handed it to Elias. "This one grows in difficult places," she said. "It is delicate yet strong. It survives where many others cannot. Reminds me of you. Elias took the flower, feeling the soft petals between his fingers. He looked into her eyes, sensing a depth of meaning in her words. He wanted to speak, to tell her how much he appreciated her, how much her presence had changed him. But the right words eluded him. Instead, he simply nodded, feeling a connection that needed no explanation. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Their walks became a regular ritual. They helped each other with chores, shared meals, and discovered the beauty of quiet companionship. Island's encouragement inspired Elias to experiment with new techniques on his farm, blending traditional methods with her knowledge of nature. Slowly, small successes began to appear: healthier crops, happier animals, and a renewed sense of hope. Despite these small victories, life was not without its challenges. Some villagers still doubted Elias's ability to succeed, whispering about his luck and the unusual friendship he had formed. Others were curious, observing the growing closeness between Elias and Island. But the two remained focused on each other, and the shared moments that mattered far more than gossip or opinion. One evening, after a long day working in the fields, they sat together under the oak tree, watching the sun set over the hills. Elias felt a surge of emotion, a mix of gratitude, admiration, and something deeper he had never allowed himself to name. Aylin noticed the look in his eyes and reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally, and a quiet understanding passed between them. No words were needed. Each felt the bond growing stronger, a connection built on respect, trust, and shared experience. As twilight gave way to night, Elias spoke softly, almost to himself. "I don't know what I would do without you, Island. You make even the hardest days feel lighter. You remind me why I keep going, why I keep trying, even when it feels impossible." Aylin smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "And you remind me of the beauty and determination and care. Life is hard, Elias, but we don't have to face it alone. That is what matters." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the soft glow of fireflies and the gentle rustle of leaves, Elias realized that their friendship had grown into something much deeper. He felt a sense of peace he had not known for years, a sense that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, he had someone by his side who believed in him, who respected him, and who shared his hopes and dreams. The bond between Elias and Island continued to grow, strengthened by trust, shared effort, and the simple joy of companionship. They laughed together, worked together, and supported each other through every difficulty. The farm, though still a place of struggle, became a place of life and possibility, illuminated by Aylin's presence and the love that quietly blossomed between them. By the time winter approached, Elias knew that his life had changed in ways he could not have imagined months before. He had found not only a friend but a companion who inspired him, understood him, and accepted him completely. In Aylin's company, he discovered the courage to dream again, not just of a successful farm, but of a life filled with connection, hope, and love. The winter had passed, and spring arrived with a promise of new beginnings. The first hints of green appeared in the fields, delicate shoots pushing through the hard brown soil. Elias felt a renewed sense of hope. The farm, after months of struggle, seemed to be slowly waking from its long dormancy. But life had a way of reminding him that hope alone was never enough. One morning, he noticed the sky turning dark and heavy, clouds rolling in faster than usual. By midday, the rain began to fall in thick, cold sheets. Elias watched anxiously as water pooled in the furrows of his fields, threatening the fragile crops he had planted with such care. Hours turned into a relentless storm. The river, which had always been a quiet companion to the farm, began to swell dangerously, its calm surface now churning and frothing. Hyelus ran to check the lower fields, heart pounding, mud splashing against his boots. Some of the plants had already been uprooted, their roots exposed to the unforgiving rain. The wind tore at the young shoots, bending them almost to the ground. He felt a tight knot of fear in his chest. Months of painstaking labor were at risk of being washed away in a single day. He worked tirelessly, trying to save what he could. He tied the taller plants to stakes, dug trenches to redirect the water, and did everything in his power to protect the animals and secure the fences. But the rain showed no mercy, and the soil already weakened from previous seasons gave way in some areas. Elias's body ached, his hands raw from digging and tying, and his clothes soaked through with rain and mud. For the first time in a long while, despair began to creep in. It was then that Island appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, her presence calm but urgent. "Elias!" she called, wading through the wet grass toward him. Her hair clung to her face, and her boots were coated in mud, yet she moved with determination. "We can't stop now. Let's do what we can together." Her words, simple as they were, gave Elias a spark of renewed energy.
Aelin!
"I don't know if we can save it all," he admitted, his voice strained. "The rain, it's too strong. The soil is too soft. I don't know if anything will survive." Island shook her head, her dark eyes steady and confident. "Don't say that. We can't control the storm, but we can control what we do, step by step. Plant by plant, animal by animal. We'll do it together." And so side by side they worked. Elias marveled at Aelin's energy and courage. Even in the storm, she moved with purpose, carefully tending the crops, checking the animals, and helping him repair the worst of the flood damage. She reminded him to breathe, to take small steps, to focus on what they could save rather than what they had already lost. Her presence was like a steady flame in the storm, giving him strength when he felt he had none left. Hours passed, and the rain finally began to ease. The sky remained gray, but the worst had passed. Elias looked over the fields, noting what had survived and what had been lost. Though much of the crop had been damaged, some areas remained intact, and the animals were safe. He was exhausted, soaked through, and his hands were blistered, but he felt a sense of quiet relief. "We did what we could," he said, finally allowing himself a small smile. Aelin reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Yes, we did. And tomorrow we will do more. Together. Together." Her voice carried a warmth and determination that filled him with courage. Elias realized that for the first time he no longer felt alone in his struggles. He had someone who would stand by him through hardship, someone who believed in him even when he doubted himself. In the following days they worked tirelessly to repair the damage. Aelin stayed longer than usual, helping Elias tend the weakened soil, replant what could be saved, and strengthen the fences to withstand future storms. Together they improvised irrigation channels to prevent water from pooling and applied techniques Elias had never tried before. Aelin's knowledge of the land, drawn from her Apache heritage and her respect for nature, proved invaluable. Elias began to see changes, not just in the farm but in himself. Where he had once felt hopeless, he now felt determined. Where he had once believed that misfortune was all he would ever know, he now saw possibility. And in Aelin he discovered a source of unwavering support. She did not pity him, she did not judge him. She simply believed in what he could do, and inspired him to believe in it too. One afternoon, as the sun broke through the clouds and the wet earth steamed in the warmth, Elias and Aelin took a break under the old oak tree by the river. Elias leaned back against the trunk, feeling the ache of muscle and bone from endless work, yet he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. "I don't know what I would do without you," he said quietly. "I might have given up this time or worse," felt defeated. Aelin smiled, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "You would have found a way." "You always do. But sometimes having someone beside you makes the impossible a little easier." "We make each other stronger."
Her words resonated deeply within him.
He realized that it was not just the storm that had tested him, but the loneliness of facing life's struggles alone. With Aelin by his side, he felt capable of confronting any challenge, no matter how great. He began to understand that strength was not only in hard work and persistence, but also in connection, the bond between two people who could share hope, courage, and resilience. The weeks that followed were demanding but full of quiet victories. Crops that seemed lost began to sprout again, nurtured carefully by their hands. The animals, once frightened and exhausted, regained their energy and health. The soil, though still fragile, started to recover under their combined care. Each small success reinforced Elias's belief in himself and in the value of their partnership. One evening, as they sat together watching the sun set over the fields, Elias realized how much he had come to rely on Island, not just for help, but for the quiet strength she brought into his life. "Alien," he said softly, "I can't imagine facing any challenge without you now. You've changed everything for me, in ways I never expected." Island reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "And you've changed me," she replied. "You've shown me the courage to keep going, to hope, and to see the good in life, even when it is hard. We lift each other up. That is what matters." Their shared effort and trust deepened their connection, weaving a bond stronger than either could have imagined. Elias began to realize that love was not just about passion or attraction. It was about standing together through storms, literal and figurative, and finding hope in the presence of someone who truly believed in you. By the time summer arrived, the farm was in a fragile but promising state. The rains had stopped, the soil had begun to recover, and new crops were starting to grow. Elias felt a cautious optimism he had not experienced in years. He and Island had worked tirelessly side by side through exhaustion and fear, yet they had persevered. The farm had survived, and in doing so their partnership had been solidified. One evening, as they walked along the riverbank, Island paused and looked at him with a quiet seriousness. "Elias," she said, "I have something to tell you. You faced so much hardship, yet you never gave up. You've shown me what strength truly means. And I want you to know, I choose to be with you no matter what the future holds." Elias felt his heart swell. The words were simple, but the meaning was profound. He realized that the storms of life, no matter how fierce, could be faced with courage and love. Island had chosen him, not for his success, not for the farm, but for the man he was inside, determined, caring, and resilient. As the stars began to appear in the evening sky, Elias and Island stood together, hand in hand, gazing at the river that had witnessed the beginning of their bond. The farm, battered but surviving, reflected their own journey, a testament to persistence, hope, and the power of standing together. For the first time, Elias felt a sense of certainty. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he was no longer alone. With Island by his side, he could face anything. The turning point had come, not just in the survival of the farm, but in the growth of their love. Through hardship, they had discovered strength in each other. Through storms, they had built trust, and through shared effort and unwavering support, they had found a connection that would guide them through every challenge yet to come. The days that followed the storm were filled with a quiet sense of renewal. The farm, though still fragile, was beginning to thrive again. Crops were sprouting in places where they had seemed lost, and the animals, once frightened by the rain and wind, now grazed calmly in the fields. Elias felt a sense of pride and relief. He had worked tirelessly, but this time he had not been alone. Island's presence had made all the difference. Her guidance, support, and unwavering belief in him had not only helped the farm survive, but had also given him a new perspective on life. Elias had spent countless hours reflecting on the past months. He realized that before meeting Island, he had carried the weight of the world alone. He had measured success by the yield of crops, the approval of neighbors, and the survival of his farm. Now he understood that life was not just about surviving. It was about connection, support, and love. Island had shown him that the most meaningful victories were those shared with someone who cared. Someone who could stand beside you in both struggle and triumph. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the fields, casting long shadows across the land, Elias and Island sat together under their favorite oak tree by the river. The air was warm and soft, filled with the sounds of birds returning to their nests and the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Elias looked at her, feeling a mix of admiration, gratitude, and a growing tenderness that he could no longer ignore. "You know," he began softly, "I never imagined life could feel like this. Not just the farm surviving, but this. Being with you, sharing everything, facing it all together, it's more than I ever hoped for." Island reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Elias," she said gently, You have shown me what true strength and courage look like. You never gave up, even when life seemed impossible. And through it all, you have remained kind, patient, and full of hope. I have watched you grow, and I have grown with you."
Elias's heart swelled at her words.
There was a simplicity and honesty in her voice that touched him deeply. He realized that he did not need riches, accolades, or the approval of others. What mattered most was the connection they had built, the trust, respect, and love that had grown slowly, steadily, through shared effort and unwavering support. Aelin's eyes met his, and in them, Elias saw a reflection of all he had ever hoped for: acceptance, understanding, and a willingness to face the future together. He felt a courage he had never known before, a certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them side by side. The farm, the struggles, the storms, all of it had led to this moment, and he understood, finally, that life's greatest victories were not measured by what one achieved alone, but by the bonds one built along the way. For a few moments they sat in silence, simply holding hands and feeling the comfort of each other's presence. The river flowed gently beside them, a quiet witness to their journey. The stars began to appear one by one, twinkling in the darkening sky. Elias realized that, like the stars, hope could shine even in the darkest moments, and that with Ailin he had found a light that would guide him through anything. "I have something to tell you," Ailin said softly, her voice carrying a gentle firmness. "Elias, I have thought about this for a long time. I have watched you face every challenge with courage and determination. I have seen your heart, your kindness, and your perseverance, and I want you to know, you are the man I choose for my future." Elias felt a wave of emotion wash over him. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight he could not ignore. He realized that the struggles, the hardships, and the storms they had faced together had prepared him for this moment. He had found someone who truly saw him, who believed in him, and who wanted to share a life with him. Not because of his farm, his success, or anything he could give her, but because of the man he was inside. He looked into Aelin's eyes, seeing both love and determination reflected back at him. "Ailin," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I choose you too. I want to share my life with you, through every challenge, every joy, every moment. Together we can face anything, and I will always stand by you, just as you have stood by me."
A smile spread across Aelin's face, and she leaned closer, resting her head on his shoulder.
The warmth of the moment wrapped around them like a gentle blanket. For Elias, it felt as if the world itself had paused, allowing him to savor this perfect moment of connection, trust, and love. All the hardship, all the struggle had led to this, the certainty that he was not alone, and that he had found a partner who would walk beside him through life. The weeks that followed were filled with joy, hard work, and quiet celebrations of their partnership. They planned together, combining their knowledge and skills to strengthen the farm. Ailin taught Elias new techniques for irrigation, planting, and soil care, while he shared his own experiences and innovations. The land slowly flourished under their combined efforts, reflecting not just their labor but their love, patience, and shared vision for the future. Neighbors began to notice the change, seeing not just a farm that was recovering, but a bond that had formed between two people who had faced life's challenges together. Some were surprised, others curious, but Elias and Ailin paid little attention. Their focus was on each other, on the life they were building, and on the quiet victories that came with patience and dedication. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, Elias and Ailin walked through the fields together. The soil smelled rich and alive, the crops swaying gently in the breeze. They stopped near the riverbank where they had first met months ago. Elias knelt, picking a small bouquet of wildflowers from the edge of the field. He handed them to Ailin, his hands trembling slightly. "For all you've done, and for all you are," he said softly, "I want to give you this, not just as a gift, but as a promise that I will stand by you, care for you, and love you through every season of our lives." Ailin took the flowers, her eyes glistening with tears of happiness. "And I promise the same, Elias. Together we will face everything. Together we will build a life filled with hope, love, and resilience. As they stood side by side, watching the river reflect the last light of the day, Elias felt a deep sense of peace. The struggles of the past, the storms, the droughts, the long days of labor had shaped him, but they had not broken him. Instead, they had led him to Aelin, to the love and partnership that made every hardship worthwhile. He realized that life was not about avoiding struggle, but about finding someone who would stand beside you through it all, someone who would believe in you, encourage you, and share in both the triumphs and the trials. In the months that followed, their life together took shape. They worked on the farm side by side, celebrating each small success and learning from each challenge. They shared meals, stories, and dreams beneath the same oak tree where they had first connected. The bond they had formed deepened with every passing day, rooted in respect, trust, and love. Elias often reflected on how much his life had changed. Once he had been a lonely man struggling against the odds, unsure if his efforts would ever bear fruit. Now he had a partner, a friend, and a love that filled his heart with warmth. He understood that the greatest rewards in life were not material, but emotional. The connections we build, the trust we earn, and the love we share. One quiet evening, as they watched the stars twinkle in the sky, Elias turned to Aelin and said, "I used to think life was just about surviving, but now I know it's about sharing life. Sharing love, facing challenges together. And with you, I feel like I can do anything." Aelin smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "And I feel the same. We are stronger together, and our future is bright because we will face it side by side." As they sat beneath the stars, hand in hand, the river flowing gently beside them, Elias realized that he had found not just love, but a true partnership. One built on courage, resilience, and unwavering support. Life would always bring challenges, but with Aelin by his side, he knew they could overcome anything. Together, they would build a future filled with hope, joy, and endless possibilities. And in that moment, Elias felt complete, not because the farm had flourished, nor because the neighbors admired his work, but because he had found the person he wanted to share every sunrise, every storm, and every dream with. Aelin had chosen him, and he had chosen her. Together they were ready to face the world, hand in hand, hearts united, and spirits unbreakable.